and art institutions. Last year was the 10th anniversary celebration that occurred virtually, and this year is our attempt to offer a number of the in-person exhibitions and events that had to be postponed last year. And plus, we got really inspired by the emerging artists and their energy. And so they have helped carry this through. And we're looking for our next host city, if anyone's out there willing to help us with that. Let's see, so the inspiring events of Sculpture X 2020 and 2021 trace back to a planning meeting that I found in my calendar last night that occurred on October 20th of 2018. And that was organized by Lisa Austin of Edinburgh University of Pennsylvania, one of the original founders of Sculpture X. Thank you, Lisa, for suggesting Pittsburgh and Greensburg as the site of the 10th anniversary and of bringing our communities together. Through thick and thin, it's been a pleasure to work with this generous group over the past 3 years, which includes Lisa from Edinburgh and also of Civitas in Erie, Patty Beachley of Seton Hill University, James Laux of Chatham University, who just had to step away, Tom Como and Sean McMillan of Slippery Rock University, and Grace Chin of the Sculpture Center in Cleveland. 2 students joined our planning group last year after Emerging X 2020. That's Riley Brown of Ontario College of Art and Design University and Melanie Lansdell of University of Kentucky. Also like to acknowledge our partners of Sculpture X 2021, including the Westmoreland Museum of Art, Society of Sculptors, Associated Artists of Pittsburgh, and our symposium sponsor, Lancaster Foundry Supply. Thank you, everybody. And now the event we've really been waiting for this whole time is the Emerging Artist PECHA KUCHA. So Melanie Lansdell will moderate and introduce our presenters. Melanie earned her BA here in Pittsburgh at Chatham University and is currently completing an MFA at the University of Kentucky. She's an interdisciplinary artist and alum of the Sculpture X Emerging Artist PECHA KUCHA presenting last fall. And with Riley Brown, she helped to select, organize, and prepare participants of February's Small Sculpture X, as well as today's presenters. Please welcome Melanie Lansdell.
Hey, thank you so much, Delaney, for that introduction. Thank you, everyone, for coming here today to attend our PECHA KUCHA presentation with our emerging artists. One thing I'll say is, so PECHA KUCHA is just a type of presentation. It's honestly really nice because it prevents artists from rambling, which is something we love to do. It's 20 slides and 20 seconds per slide, so it goes pretty quickly. Yeah, and we hope you enjoy all of our presenters that we have today. And I just want to thank so much our presenters. Thank you guys for agreeing to participate in Sculpture X. It's been such an amazing time working with you, everyone in Sculpture X, but I really want to thank you guys for putting the time in to make your presentations, for coming here today, being here with us, and sharing your work with us. It means so much. Yeah. Thank you so much. And I guess I'll introduce first all of our presenters and then we can start. So first we have Heather Milecki, who received her MFA from Louisiana State University and her BA from Cleveland State University. We also have Ben Oblivion, who received a BFA from Cleveland Institute of Art. We have Marseille Nixon Washington, who received a BFA from West Virginia University. We have Claire Wang, who is currently pursuing a BFA at University of Pittsburgh here, which is our institution that's hosting us right at this moment for this event. And then virtually, we have Emily Irvin, who received an MFA from the University of Colorado Boulder and a BFA from Ohio State University. We also have Katie Liu, who is currently pursuing a BFA at Ontario College of Art and Design. We also have Patrick Stockmall, who is as well currently pursuing a BFA at Ontario College of Art and Design. And then we lastly have Bradley Wyant, who's currently pursuing an MFA at Ohio State University and received their BFA from Edinburgh University of Pennsylvania. So I'd like to welcome first our first presenter, Heather Malecki. Come on up here, Heather. Going to do first is open your, do you have all the presentations open? Oh, Sorry.
You do share screen.
Yeah.
You'll find it.
Well, okay. And then, okay, you should be good. As soon as you're ready, just press this button. It'll start the timer too.
Go full screen.
Okay,
Mhm.
so just click it. All right.
That should full screen you.
Hi, my name is Heather Malecki. I graduated in 2019 from Louisiana State University. And wait, what? I'm gonna have to restart because this is how timed, right? Sorry. Hold the mic out. Oh, like hold it, and then I could walk around. All right. How do I start from the beginning again? I'm sorry. It's just that this is time. All right. Let's try that again. Take two. That's not what it was supposed to press. All right, again, that's not the right slide. All right, so I want to speak about this work. It's titled Suburban Nightmare. It was a part of my thesis. My thesis was a 3-part series. This was speaking about childhood trauma. And I was sort of conceptually thinking of childhood trauma as being falling into a sinkhole. And so I used the texture to sort of create this subterranean living room. I used plaster and I made the cardboard furniture. In the cardboard television, I had a video playing of a child cycling through emotions, happy, sad, angry, confused, sort of this stepping stone into mental illness. In this piece, this is where I'm talking about mental illness. This piece is called Diagnosis Hysteria. And in Diagnosis Hysteria, it is a continuation from that childhood trauma. But now these confusing emotions have created mental illness. And now this person finds themselves in a mental institution. I use plaster again for the wet drapery and the texture. I use plaster a lot because I think that plaster is versatile, but also it's very strong and hard, except it actually is really fragile, like human beings. Again, I have another video that's projected in this room of someone a little bit older, but cycling through those same emotions. Maybe a little more madness now. The third part of this now talks about drug addiction. So this is sort of a representation of drug addiction. And again, there is plaster in this room. There's a video in this room. They're very similar. One of the techniques I like to use in my work is mold making. This is a simple 2-part mold that I made, and then I pour plaster positives into it. I thought of baby birds as drug addicts because they're hungry and they're helpless. This is the overview of the entire show. The show was titled So Long, Sinkhole City. It was at Glassell Gallery in Baton Rouge. I am also a performance artist. And this is a performance I did titled What It Means to Be Human. And here I sit and I contemplate what it means to be human. And I find that I don't like it in this performance. And as I figure that out, I apply components of robotic parts to my body, essentially removing this humanity. And much like human nature and in the style of humans. I decide I regret that decision at the end, and I wish that I could go back, but I can't. I went too far. And it's sort of a tale of the grass is always greener on the other side. I was part of another performance. Me and some of my friends in grad school got together and we were thinking about women, women artists, and suicide because it happens so frequently. And so we created this piece called Ophelia's about women artists and suicide. In 2019, my father, who was already suffering from dementia, fell down at home and he broke his neck. He ended up in a nursing home and it was a lot to take. And as I went through the house, moving him into the nursing home, I found all these photographs and I created this piece that was called Dementia Stole My Happy Memories of Summer. And I feel like the title gives away the whole piece. So in 2020, there was this pandemic that happened. And I'm sure we all had emotions when that happened, right? And so did I. And I went to my studio and I was working. And I didn't want to work with all this heavy, dark subject matter that I usually do. I wanted to lighten it up. So I was thinking about Frankenstein. And then this is sort of my tongue-in-cheek piece about the pandemic. And I was able to, I have, as a sculptor, I collect a lot of objects. So I was able to really get into my objects and start just working them in fun ways to amuse myself because that's what I needed during the pandemic. Also, another thing I realized during the pandemic was that I really like singing karaoke. I hadn't known this about myself, but I do. And so I started recording myself singing karaoke, and then I just happenstance found this old karaoke machine and painted it and started projecting my karaoke performances onto it. This is my most recent piece, and it's also a piece in progress, so it is not finished. It's called Don't Look Now, and I need to take a moment to thank the Andy Warhol Foundation and Spaces in Cleveland for the Satellite Fund. And the Satellite Fund is making that project possible. And now I would like to thank all of you for listening to me stumble and fumble through this lecture. And if you want to follow me, there I am, Studio Malecki, or my website, and or if you want to email me, and I would get back to anyone who does. Thank you.
Okay, cool, great. All right, so thank you very much. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
All right, hopefully we don't have any more mic issues. All right, so let's go ahead. We're gonna move on to Ben Oblivion. Get on up here. So, let me share screen. Fix that one.
Okay,
But be careful not to turn it off.
I think I'm just gonna grip this table really
That's
hard.
fine. Just stay right over here. And so whenever you're ready, just click that. The
sure.
timing should work.
All righty. Okay. Hi, my name is Ben Oblivion. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I am a interdisciplinary performance artist, which coincidentally is exactly what my career aptitude test in high school said I was going to be. As an artist, I'm interested in the construction of identity and personal narrative and how those things are influenced by pop culture and the media that we consume. So in my work, what I do a lot is I take characters and tropes and structures from pop culture, and then I recontextualize them to confuse their meaning and make room for new meaning. The first work that I'm going to talk about is actually a video work. It is an incomplete list of ways to die in a Thomas Kinkade painting, and this is inspired by my sort of love-hate relationship with Thomas Kinkade. I think what draws me to his paintings and then also draws me away from his paintings, he presents this really easy digestible fantasy that's very saccharine and passes itself off as universal. Like by omitting figures, he depersonalizes a lot of these landscapes. And I think that it like is sort of this insidious nostalgic fantasy. So what I wanted to do with it is I wanted to take this and I wanted to insert something that was actually universal. So death, like everybody dies. So I wanted to use that as a way to sort of question this universal thing that he's presenting, this nostalgia, and make you sort of look twice at what's happening. This next work that should be coming up, or maybe it's not coming up. I'm just going to move on to the next slide. Oh, uh-oh. This next work is about absence and the lack of light. There we go. So this work is a performance called Thus Spake Stupid. In a lot of my performance work, I sample characters and tropes, like I said earlier, and this was inspired by the character of like the goofy t-shirt guy in teen movies. And I'm very fascinated by this character because he's always the butt of the joke and he sort of acts as this negative enforcement of social mores. And he completely lacks self-awareness and any character development whatsoever. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to give him an existential crisis. I made him the sole figure in the narrative. So the movement of the narrative relied on him. So he had to, in some way, move forward. But at the same time, I'm not looking to make like nice, tidy narratives or happy endings. So his way of moving forward is like this cascading t-shirt reveal that like goes from I'm with stupid to we are all stupid. And then he like runs in place up against the scrolling background and it creates the illusion of motion without actually being any sort of motion. And it's like this really futile, hopeless image. Speaking of which, the next work is also a performance, and this is called Nothing Gold Can Stay. This is not inspired by a character, but more of a narrative structure. I find myself often returning to this idea of like being the chosen one or having some sort of destiny. And I wanted to play with that. So I created this character of a goldfish whose mother told him that he was destined for greatness on his deathbed or on her deathbed, which is already like this very futile sort of hopeless image, like this character with maximum potential for growth, restricted by like the size of its environment. And it's not really a happy ending. He ends up having to grapple with his own powerlessness and ordinariness through goldfish crackers and this like little fish tank castle decor thing. And it ends with him flopping around on the ground and hallucinating his mother, and apologizing for never reaching his true potential, and then gasping for breath and dying. And then the full performance ends with the sound of a toilet flush. So like, again, really happy and uplifting. On the note of happy and uplifting, this is a series of works. It's what I did basically after the onset of coronavirus. I had a lot of momentum that just went like out the window when the pandemic hit. Being a performance artist, it's not easy to do your work if you can't be in front of people. So this is my response. It was a series of short video works that I posted to Instagram, and the project is called Infinite Monkey Theorem, which is inspired by the statistical theorem that posits that like it has all sorts of bizarre implications, but it's popularly illustrated by like the image of a monkey at a typewriter for an infinite amount of time, eventually typing out William Shakespeare. So I took that as sort of my inspiration, and I removed sort of my critical brain and just focused on production. It's not all good, but there's a lot of like really interesting things that came from it that I'm happy with, that have led me into new avenues in my practice. One of which is sort of a return to object making, which I got my degree in sculpture and worked with objects. This is a project that I am in progress on. I'm currently collecting as many Princess the Bear Beanie Babies as I possibly can, but only paying less than $10 for them. If you're not familiar, this is the world's most expensive Beanie Baby. I'm also getting really interested in superhero movies and action movies, and also cat trees. Yeah, I don't know. I'm getting drawn to all these new things, and I'm really excited about the future and the new avenues I'm pursuing in my practice. If you're interested in following those avenues and finding out what my future looks like, feel free to follow me on Instagram. I am great big extra super wow. And then if you're interested in what my past looks like, you can check out my website. Pretty much everything that's halfway decent over the last 7 years is there. And thank you so much. I really quickly wanted to thank Sculpture X for having me, and Melanie for putting all this together. And if you came to my performance last night, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben. Well, thank you very much, Ben, for that wonderful presentation. We're going to have some questions. So if you have questions for Ben, please type it in the chat if you're here virtually, or raise your hand. Oh, that's not right. Okay. Okay. Yes. Uh-huh. Okay. Thank you.
This isn't a question, it's a special request. Could you please do a performance sometime about the Thomas Kincaid piece?
I'll say yes to that. I'll say yes, and.
Yes, and okay, wonderful. Anyone else?
So thank you, Ben, and thank you for your performance last night, which was really wonderful. And so I'm wondering if you could, so you said sculpture in Cleveland, and so how did you get into performance, and maybe if you had any training about that whatsoever, aside from that aptitude test when you were in high school?
Yeah, so the program that I went to at the Cleveland Institute of Art was technically sculpture and expanded media. So there was a lot of freedom when it came to what exactly you could do after you went through like the basic skill building classes. And I was always really attracted to theater in high school, shockingly. And art school is expensive and I'm not rich. So there was a certain point where I was like, well, there's an equipment checkout and I can get a camera and I can perform for the camera. And then I can just not use the camera and I can perform in front of people and I don't have to spend a lot of money on it, which is like a very simplified version of how I actually relate to performance. It's a lot more complicated than that, but that was sort of my like entry into it as far as like step one in the art school environment.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. Thanks so much for the performance yesterday. It was great. I have a question about, like, I guess I have two questions. The first one is, would you like rehearsal your performance? If so, like how long like do you prepare for each performance? And also like how do you deal with your own emotions and the energies after you perform every time?
Yeah, sure. So I'd like to say that I rehearse more than I do. Usually when I perform, I'm like writing up until like 3 or 4 hours before the actual performance. And then by then I'm like kind of burnt out. So I usually end up only running through it like once. And which is actually not that bad of a thing because then it keeps me fresh as far as like having to be sharp in the actual timing of the performance, and then I can respond to things. Like last night, I couldn't get the t-shirt on the frickin' Charlie Brown Christmas tree. So I had to sort of like, I don't know, figure out a way to make that work. And I didn't get too stuck in how I had pre-planned it. And then as far as like recovery goes, I don't know, it depends. Sometimes if the work is like really physical, like with the thus spake stupid performance at the end, like I'm literally running in place to the point where I'm like out of breath and exhausted. And the first time I did it, I like scared myself a little bit because I didn't know how to breathe as I was doing it, and I like got really really lightheaded and almost actually passed out, and then had to go like sit by myself for a while. And then sometimes it's not so aggressive. Like last night I wasn't super emotionally drained or exhausted or anything, um but I don't know, it depends. It's a very complicated emotional state to be in to perform. Um, and it's something I talk about a lot with my performance art friends. Like anytime you're making or walking into the situation where you're performing, or even beforehand when you're writing things or preparing, it's this really vulnerable emotional state. And I don't know, I guess it's just about being careful.
Okay,
Yeah.
really quickly, very, very quick question from Patty.
So you talked about being interested in pop narratives. I wonder how much do you invest personal narratives into the work or personal memory into the work and kind of mix them all together?
I mean, the balance is maybe like 30-70, maybe like 60-40. I don't know. The pop cultural narratives act as the frame, because ultimately what I'm doing is I'm holding myself and my own experience up to the sort of barometer that is portrayed through these narratives. Like this is the way that your life will be when it is ideal. And I sort of set myself up in these situations where I create these narratives that I'm destined to fail in. Um, and the personal experience part comes in the writing and the grappling. Um, and it becomes very overblown and hyperbolic, but it comes from a very real place. Pretty much I don't go out of my way to sort of contrive moments. I sit down and I write a whole bunch of things, and I pick the things that feel natural and feel right and feel authentic in that moment. Um, it's hard to sort of quantify that, but yeah, I'd say like 70-40 or 70-40. I went to school for math.
Thank you very much, Ben, for your presentation. We very much appreciate it. Okay, so next we have Marseille, Nixon, Washington. Come on up. Do you want this in here? Do you want this? Like, do you want to be holding this? Okay. The timer's on. Just press
All right. Hello, everybody. It's working. Hi. I just want to say thank you to everybody who's here and online. Yeah, my name is Marseille, and I just graduated with my BFA in ceramic arts from West Virginia University. Here's my artist statement, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I am from Pittsburgh, born and raised. I'm actually, like everyone on my family is from here, but I actually recently learned that I am from the Takar people in Nigeria. And here's my work. My work is inspired by Nigerian Udu drums, libation vessels, as well as the enduring legacy of poetry and movement. Yeah, my work is all made out of ceramic arts. It's made out of ceramic because I feel as though like ceramic objects hold the history of what was, what is, and what the future is going to be. Ceramics is one of the most like ancient forms of art. My process is based in a process called coil building, which is a process of rolling, pounding, paddling. It is an enduring process. I see ceramics as a way of documenting truths. When I first got into ceramics, I just fell in love with the fact that like this material is like, it permanizes itself. So through the fire, you're able to it just permanizes itself. My work is basically made in response to the burning of African American history. When we look at the history of Black Wall Street, the history of the burning of churches, my work is in direct response to that. It is in direct response to the legacy of survival, the legacy of surviving, and what that means. Yeah, and every time I speak about my work, I get very emotional because it is, yeah, because I am a survivor of many things, as everyone on the earth is. Yeah. With this piece, you can see the words written across the bottom of it. Those are the words for a song that is actually very familiar in the Black community called Hold On. And it is a song that has carried my family from generations to generations. When I look at the forms, when I think about form, and when I think about shape, and when I think about sculpture, I think about the ways that it relates to my body, to the Black body, to everyone else's bodies. I think about its imperfections, and I think about the beauty inside of those imperfections. The context of my pieces is based on my materials. It is based on the process. It is based on the way that I created. Here are the images of the libation vessels. This is basically them in process. All of these are already finished and they're ready to be put into a process where I create the surface that is burnished. So I'm just like holding these and caring for them. Here is actually my first ever PECHA. So ceramics is a lot of just process and honestly chemistry. And so here's like a larger kiln that I built outside on the kiln pad. Here's some images of my process. On the other side, these are some natural materials that I use in order to create different colors, different forms, depending on what it is. It will create some really beautiful surfaces and really beautiful colors. Here's also some of my experimentation with natural materials. There's some seaweed, some salt, which gives it a nice orange color. There's some sawdust. Yeah, and this is really the fun part of art making for me. And here is the pit/stagger firing process. Every time my mom asks me, what am I doing? And I'm doing this, I just say, I'm barbecuing some pots. And that's like my favorite term to use because yeah, it's really amazing. And so what am I up to? I am a teaching artist all around the city. I do a lot of teaching, that's what I love to do. But since I graduated, I actually had to downsize my work. And I'm actually at Union Project in the Braddock Library right now. Yeah, and I'm excited to see where my work goes. I'm also excited to implement colors, and I really, really, really want to go larger. And yeah, if you have a yard that I can pit fire in, because that has been the struggle, not being able to pit fire. Yeah, so if you got a yard, I'm here. So, and then here's where you can contact me. So yeah, thank you. I have spoken.
Thank you so much, Marseille, for that great presentation. If anyone has questions for Marseille, if you're online or in person, please raise your hand. Okay, I got a question. Okay. Okay. Hello.
Hey, Marseille, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm so interested in the works where, you have this very modeled, hand-built form, and then you keep the coils at the base for almost the stem. Can you talk about that decision and why you sort of have that contrast in form?
Yeah, I just wanted to also, I'm also curious about, I remember, because those pieces at the bottom are separate pieces. So I'm also curious about that.
So the actual ceramic forms and the pieces that are on the bottom are completely separate. So in traditional coil building processes, because in West Africa, the forms are used for cooking and other things like that, for storing things. And so they're used in the dirt ground. So there's no need for it to have a foot to sit on the table. So I really enjoyed that about the process making. So I decided that it was really important in order to keep that, in order to keep that round bottom. I think that there is something very caring about that. And so I am also a jewelry maker, and I also love adornment. I love bangles. I love all of those things. And I loved how these rings these display rings are kind of like in reference to that. Yes, I hope that answers your question.
Anyone else have a question? Oh, Katie, go ahead and say your question.
You see me on the screen? Yeah? Okay, cool. Hi Marseille, great presentation. I was gonna ask about the natural materials that you're using, like mixing seaweed and those sort of things. Like, do you plan to keep doing that? I'm really interested in sort of like using natural elements and stuff. So I think that's really cool that you're doing that.
Oh yeah, I think that that's a beautiful thing about ceramics is you kind of have to know your environment. And so that's something that I really enjoy is like knowing what resources do I have at this moment, what don't I have, and what would each of these things kind of like would affect what I have. So I don't see myself quitting. So yeah, if that answers your question.
Cool. Yeah. Do you want to like experiment more with different materials, like outside of what you've already done, or?
Oh yes, absolutely. I've done a lot of like projects with hair and all of those things. So yeah.
One more question for Marseille.
Okay. So this is a question about process and something that I might be interested in doing myself. You're doing pit fires, and I've always been so interested in pit fires, but I've never been able to. When you make your pit fire, do you put the pot in like in as greenware, or is it bisque fired before?
I bisque fire them. I bisque fire all of them just so I can like, because you lose so many pieces throughout the ceramic process. So I like to bisque fire them so I know they're not gonna like explode. And then I like to then pit fire them and burnish them and all that fun stuff. Yes.
Great question. Thank you so much, Marseille, for your presentation. Okay, so next we have our final in-person presentation.
Do we tell jokes in the meantime? Are we the like backup entertainment?
Can you still hear us?
I just joined with computer.
Okay. All good. So, video, audio, we've got everything still set. Okay,
Yeah.
we're back.
Oh, we can't see your video.
Except you can't see us. I think maybe it'll just take a minute.
It is recording.
It is still recording?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Aw.
Let's get rid of us and bring us back. Where'd it go? Show selfie. Well, I don't want to stop it.
Yeah.
So I wonder if we share screen, if you're going to be able to see the presentations.
Yeah, probably. We sent it
So
for
Clara is
some
up next. Can you see that? Okay, so you may miss the human virtual element, but you'll get the artwork. Good.
Okay. Clara, come on up here. So I wonder why that's happening. All right, well, we can't do anything about it now. So when you're ready, just press this button.
Okay.
And I checked all your videos, it'll work.
Okay, it'll work.
Yeah, cool.
Hi everyone. My name is Wang Xiaodan, but you can call me Clara because it's easier for everyone and me to pronounce. I'm from Beijing, China originally, and I moved to the US 4 years ago to study here at Pitt. And I am currently a undergrad senior student, double majoring in studio art and art history here at Pitt. Being born in one country and living in another, I'm sorry, I forgot the microphone, has provided me a lot of the raw materials for my works, and almost all the works I've created since I moved here is directly related to or based on my own experience. So I'm going to talk about some of the works I've been creating this past 2 years. The first one is an ongoing project I've been collaborating with my friend Nola Mims, who is over here. And the project started with the idea of creating a safe and free space for women of color through skateboarding, because that's how our friendship started. And every time we skated together, we talk, and the conversations we had ranges from personal life to opinions on hard topics. So the work is really meant to capturing those moments of us being there, listening and supporting each other. And every time we skate together, we would shoot photos of each other, and afterwards we would approach and edit this photos in our own artistic expressions, and then we'd come together and create zines and website as platform to showcase the work. And this is a screenshot of the website. And the next work is a performance work that I did last year. It is a really important work for me because I'm completing this work both as a creator and as a viewer of the work. And the two perspectives provided me really different experience with the work. And that also changes how I interpreted the meaning of the work. And in the first part of the performance, I was writing down numbers in Chinese and counting out loud in Chinese to feel my skin as much as I can. And as I was counting and writing, it took me about 2 hours to finish the first part. So by the time I finished the first part, I was exhausted of the. So you can hear a little bit of the sound when I was counting, and that was already halfway. So I was already forgetting about the camera. And the second part of the performance is me trying to wash off all the inks. And as I said, I was mentally and physically drained after. So I really forgot about the existence of the camera. So watching it afterwards makes me feel remote to that experience and to that situation emotions. And the work started with the question of how can we have a difficult conversation with other people who don't or can share my experience and perspective. And it became particularly relevant and dominant in my life in the past years because everything that are happening. And it's a really big question and I still can't fully answer it right now. I don't know if any of you can, but I don't think this work is an answer either. I think it's more of a process where I try to push both me and myself to face this question. This is an intermission, by the way, for me to catch my pace. So that work was really a process for me and my audiences to push themselves to face that question and think about it. And that's a gift I made in 2020 as well. Okay, so next work, something that is finally not conceptual. So this is a site-specific installation that I actually installed in the cloister out of the gallery when you walk in this building. And I attached cellophane paper on the windows by water only, and I wrinkled the cellophane. And the process of making this work is really different from a lot of my other experience because I'm a really concept-driven person, so I'm used to have a meaning of each work even before I started working on them. But this one simply started with the feeling of having something that is delightful so I can cheer myself and the audiences up. And the last project I'm going to talk about today. This is a series of paper cutting that I hand cut during the summer last year of pandemic. And each paper cutting is a response or representation of what was going on at the moment in the world. And it took me about 6 months to finish this entire series. So as I was making new cuttings, the topic for each paper cutting shifted as I saw and experienced different things. And I chose paper cutting, this traditional Chinese folk art form, because first of all, I made this work during the lockdown, so it's the easiest form to work with at home. And also it represents my cultural background. I didn't like the project for a while when I first finished it because I didn't like the division and disconnection between the visual reference and the meaning that I was trying to convey. But then as I was revisiting them, I realized that disconnection is actually paralleling with my experience as a foreigner who lived in the US. I don't quite blend in the US, and when I go back to China, I don't quite blend in that realm either. So I started to feeling conflicted between these two cultures and these two countries. And I think that's why this work is also an important work to me. And the last slide, I decided to put together a group of work together to just show you some visual connections and similarities between my work. Even though I'm a conceptual artist, there are still some similarity you can find. And I just want to thank you all, especially my professors and my friends who has always been so supportive to me during my making process. And they encouraged me to push my boundaries really. And thanks for the Sculpture X to give me the chance to present today. Thank you.
Our video's back. Thank you so much, Claire, for your presentation. It's so great to hear about everyone's work. I'm just going to stop sharing now so we can see everyone. Okay, so I'm just gonna check the chat. If anyone has any questions, you can type them in the chat or you can raise your hand. I'm just gonna start the timer. Oh, good. That's not right. Okay. Okay, coming to you.
Hey, Clara. Thank you for your presentation. I really liked the one piece with all the colorful paper in Frick, and I was just wondering what I know you said you used water, but what was the process? And also, like, how did you come up with that idea? So the process is just I raincoat I bought I want a cheap material because I'm broken. So I bought the cellophane paper on Amazon, and I just raincoat them because I want people to see it's plastic. It's not like anything fancy. So I raincoat them, and I just sprayed water on the back, and I just attached them. I think there's a static between the water and the window, and they just stayed there for a really long time. And the idea was really just, it was last year when nobody was allowed to really come in this building. So there was no people. And as Pitt student, like you all know how busy this building can get when in a normal semester. So I just really like the quietness of it. And I just thought, like everything's already so messed up because of COVID and a lot of other things. So I just want to make something simple that are cheerful. And when people see it, they can, just sit there, watch the light, watch the shadow for a little bit, and just enjoying the work without really trying to think of anything.
Any other questions for Clara?
I can't not ask you questions, Clara. Your work is so, I just think all of it promotes so much conversation for us. And while I think you spend a lot of time confronting yourself, you're asking your viewers to confront so much of themselves. And over the last year and a half, especially, your work has confronted a lot with Asian hate, and your collaboration with NOLA has had other conversations. So I think one of the things I keep thinking about, you didn't really specifically say a lot about that. You said difficult conversations, but you didn't really say a lot about what some of those conversations were for you in that. So I'm wondering, what it must be hard. So it's sort of in the same question that you asked Ben, what do you do for yourself that after some of that work, it must be exhausting. So I think about the performance piece. I think a lot about that piece a lot. I remember coming to get you after that piece. You did the piece that one day, and it was right after you did that piece the day after the Atlanta shooting of the Asian people that got shot in the parlors, and we talked a little bit about that. And I think about all of the emotional pain that happens for you after some of those pieces. And what do you do what do you do? In your question to Ben, same question to Ben, like how do you take care of yourself after a lot of that work?
Thank you for the question, first of all. Oh yeah. So I don't know. That's partially the reason why I asked Ben that question. Like, what do you do? How do you deal with your own emotions and energies? Because part of me, when I finished that performance, I was shutting that part down completely. Even though I know I want to revisit it, I want to think about it, but I was like, I can't look at it now. I can't like edit it or doing anything about it now. So I was shutting myself completely off that part of that work. And I revisited it for the critique that happened last year. And I was reopening all the files and looking at the photos and the videos. I talked about how I felt remote from that emotions and from that experience when I actually did it. And that still remains true when I'm looking at it right now during this presentation. It's just a part of me has been a part of my energy, a part of my thought has been taken away from me. And it was in that work, in that process, if that makes sense at all. So I really don't know how to, I don't have a process, like a way that I deal with all my emotions and things. I sort of just let it go either into the original work where it came from or into my next work. I just try to put all that thoughts and emotions and transfer them into some form that I can use. But I think also you said about, like I'm trying to confronting myself and my audiences to face those difficult questions. And I thought about, what is a difficult question? Like, how do I define? Because everyone has such a different definition about what is hard to talk, what is controversial to talk about. And for me, it's not that like crazy questions, like how do I resolve like the political conflict, or how do I do this? How do I do that? It's literally just like, oh, like I can't pronounce the word people right. And my friend pointed that out. And my friend Nola pointed that out. So, it's really about this small things. Like someone pointed out, oh, you have an accent. And I'm okay. Like, you can't say that. It's not like it's rude or anything, So it's like, how do we just have this conversation that we might ourselves feel scared to even ask or to even, just propose the question. I think that's what I was really trying to do through a lot of my work, if that answered the question at all.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much, Clara. So now we're going to move on to our virtual presenters. First of those, who is Emily. Emily, go ahead. You can share your screen. Start whenever you're ready.
Great. Hi, everyone. Let me just play from start. Great. My name is Emily Irvin, and I'm coming to you today as a ceramic artist from California. And from here, I'm defining my work in terms of its aesthetic categories. I'm following a single body of work, finding the threads that hold it together to form my art practice as a whole. My work is visceral, felt as instinct. Inside and between the spaces of the body. My work is bodily because it is visceral. Visceral allows the body to become a site of meaning. The beginning of the world unfolds here, where the body dwells in its effectiveness, its ability to both impact and be impacted. Where there are goosebumps on my skin, tracing the cool of air. Or where there is a stack of toilet paper, yellowed by time and touching the body, encased in resin that forms a functionless window or functional windows, and the individual spaces between. My work is gestural, as in a course of action, always responding, an anticipatory performance, a demonstration, incomplete and ongoing. The root of gesture is to bear, sharing that with care, where they both endure and signify an often intimate responsibility that can radically challenge histories of individuals and communities. Gestures index and names the specific actions that interfere with social forces in the material world. Gesture also relates to quickness, where I lose my thread of thought and find it again in a new twist or turn or path with agility and mobility. savoring the unforeseeable connectiveness between them. My work is performative. Performative. Movements or held positions in space and time that serve to communicate, as it is also oriented towards language. And a performative utterance where I say I do in accepting my position to speak here today. Performative is useful as in doing or work in action, and is not useful as in not doing. A laborious connection to bodies, a connection to craft and art, to my body, my sex, my class, my age, my ability, or my assumed inability. My work is laborious because it is performative, a record of an often collective corporeal memory through repetition and accumulation. My work is alternative. Alternative proposes other possibilities, orienting itself towards hope. Hope. Hope is a feeling of expectation and desire for something to happen. It's a feeling of trust. It's not utopic. It does not imply healing, but it does mend through actively seeking an alternative. My work is poetic. Poetic. An imaginative or sensitively emotional style of expression, breaching the confines of medium or discipline. Poetry embraces the limitations of language and empowers communication by not telling. Memories that are formless and nameless become tangible. Poetry fosters relationships, bridging the internal, subjective, and feelings with the external and the objective. The poetic finds its place beside abstraction or the intentionally opaque. It combines the physical and metaphorical space between words and materials to convey a memory. Reverberate is a body of work that I have shown here today. It is visceral, it is gestural, it is performative, it is alternative, and it is poetic. It is an installation of objects that suggest a room. The room is created from materials that I relate to childhood memories and are handled in ways that explore the feelings activated by those memories. To convey how memories surface repeatedly over time, I stuff, rip, squeeze, press, dip, fold, and hang these materials until they change, revealing something new. I refer to this process and this work as a tremor. A tremor is a reverberation of an initial event felt through a lifetime in the physical, emotional, and mental space of the body, in a family, and in a community. Memories move and weave into one another. The installation in its entirety is a tremor, as each object represents a different memory, frozen still for contemplation. These objects are presented in precarious or acrobatic positions that push the bounds of fragility, on the verge of falling and breaking, but fossilized as statues in the moment before breaking. Thank you, and this is my contact info if you would like to know the past or the future.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation. I think if people have questions, type in the chat. Maybe if someone out here has questions, they can come up just so Emily can see them. And everyone can see them since we're talking to them. Yeah, Ben, come on.
Should I stop? Is it easier for me to stop or? Okay,
Stop sharing.
great.
Hi, Emily. Thank you for presenting. I was curious, you were talking about the visceral qualities of your work, and there's a lot of things that I saw indicating the body. things meant to be put into the body. And I was wondering if, I don't know, when I think about visceral and those materials, there's some sort of like use that's implied. And I guess to like make the question as stupid as possible, like, was the toilet paper used?
No, I've done a lot of that kind of work, like bodily use, and also the Q-tips were not used. Like,
Yeah.
I think I've reached my limitation on that already, and so I think it's interesting to like contrast the kind of sterility of like the unused object, and then like make it look used by dipping it in something that's like hard, like resin. Good question. How sick am I? No.
Thank you, Ben, for that question. Anyone else have questions for Emily? Yeah, Dennis, come on up. I feel like there's a lot of similarities between the two of your work.
Hey, Emily.
Hey, Dennis, you're the one who made me apply to this. That's great. Hi.
How important is installation in your work? You know, looking at that. Also, I love how you document like the moving figure when you're documenting work, but how is it like having the full context of that work together? Like, what does the installation have in terms of importance?
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, group shows are really hard for me because, you know, they want to pick like one piece. And I think the work, I mean, it's just a room when you're inside of it. And so when the work is pulled out of that context, it loses that kind of suffocation that a room can provide. And so, yeah, good question. Yeah, it's really important, I think, for me, for it all to be together. And there's this sort of like Alice in Wonderland quality maybe of like something being too tall or too short. And so to experience all of that as like a playroom where you're like rolling on the floor on the mats and then like struggling to reach the top of the cabinet. I think like having both of those like feelings or experiences in the same space is like important.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I actually was curious if you could share with us. So I know that you're doing something exciting, but about your trajectory, kind of like, so you finished your MFA. That was your MFA show, was it?
Yeah.
So what, like, where is your work? Like, what kind of, how does your work exist now? Has it changed in a certain direction? I'm sure. And like, what are you up to now? I know that you're about to or go somewhere to do a residency, or maybe just share that with us.
Yeah, so I just came back from a 2-month residency in Italy, and that was awesome. And my work has become really site specific and kind of freeing in terms of like less bound to like childhood memories per se, and more exploring like a lot of how boundaries and borders and how that kind of like these barriers exist in our everyday life and responding to them. So I'm doing a photo project where I'm photographing like drains and sort of responding in poetry. And then I made this like 50-foot long like curtain thing out of placemats in Italy, and then like photographed it in the Imperial Forum because it was really hard to be there. I was like robbed of all of my belongings, and just like the barriers that were there for me were really difficult. So I'm like really responding to like in any material that's like available to me like in real time. So that feels freeing, I think. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm so excited to hear about the direction of your work. Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, thank you so much, Emily, for your presentation. And next, we are going to move on to Katie Lou. Katie, go ahead and share your screen and start whenever you're ready.
Hello. How do I share my screen?
It's like a little glowing button that's green in the center of the Zoom. Like it's the bottom center.
Oh, got it.
There you
Okay.
go.
Okay. How is that? Yeah, okay. Well, before I start, I just want to say that I wish I could see everybody's lovely faces right now in person. But thank you for being here, whoever is in the audience. So, all right, let me start. Well, my name is Katie Lou, and my pronouns are she, they, whatever. Right now I'm in Takaranto, and I'm a sculpture major at OCAD University with a Indigenous visual culture minor. So I guess I'm just going to start with a little statement. So with empathy to guide my intentions and uncertainty to lead my practice, I make work with the land and the body through site-specific means that are often short-lived. So I'm grounded in sort of Buddhist philosophies and now in retrospect, Indigenous teachings. So all of my work comes from the heart, basically. This piece is a revisitation that started my practice last year, basically. And I collected rocks to make clay, only to return it back to the same riverbed. So this, I basically committed to a really laborious process of hammering the rocks, as you see here, for 2 months. And it took hours and hours on end. So I did this by hand. And during this process, when at the end, when I mixed the powder, I turned it all into powder with the water, basically 90% of it all spilled on the pavement. And this is the second time it's happened. But I still brought it back to the river. That's just the little ball of clay that was left. I have intentions of revisiting this like meditation every year. I feel like a very rooted connection with clay, and it allows for some like restorative reflection. And perhaps, you know, the properties of clay are properties I seek to find in myself. This piece called Snow Love, it's about obsessive affirmation. I did this piece thinking about my grandma. I live with her and I talk about her a lot. So I was thinking about gestures of like everyday love. And here I printed basically a very big bed of snow with an orange until my feet went numb. And so thinking about that, it was a lot about sort of like ritualistic things. And then I did this with a ceremonial teacup holder. So to you, I confided. This one is a pretty big piece that's still ongoing. In this state of confusion and loss, I cradle myself like a child and sway back and forth. Boxes become maternal, and the lack of space squeezes me like the arms of my mom, cool and smooth. The walls sit with me as I sit with myself, and I remain still and I listen, receive and digest. In doing this, my box grows bigger and others join me in the same state, naked and soft as our round bodies press up against each other, cradling one another. The box grows beyond the physical realm, and through the nutrition of conversation and presence, we hold space for each other as our own walls melt behind us. So this is sort of like an ongoing series of photographs and sort of like performances, basically starting with learning to find space for myself, dealing with like a lot of like anxiety issues and stuff. So I find a lot of comfort in abandoned spaces, especially like in the city. You know, it's kind of where I can be alone and step outside of like the timeline in my own drama. But basically through sitting with myself, I met others who were doing the same through this little weekly club that I hosted every week. These are my friends, and Patrick's missing in here, but basically we called every week on Fridays for 6 months, nonstop for hours on end. And we basically just found a lot of connection, and it's a little family. So this box can also be seen as like the box that I put in myself. It's also the box that is on teams and stuff. So I also continue this through photography. I guess I basically stripped and sat on top of a scanner. And that's how I got these photos. But yeah, and then ginseng, this is a 3D model animation. It's also a continuation of Confide. So just sort of figuratively, this ginseng is a root. It's a herbal root in Chinese medicine, also in indigenous medicine. And it can often like look like a human. So I see this piece as sort of like a balance between agony and rebirth and transformation in terms of like the movements of the piece. And on the inside, it reflects the outside, if you know what I'm saying. Kiss Me Again is a performance I did with Patrick Stockmall. We did it over Instagram Live and we exchanged 360 kisses and invited our friends and strangers to come on video, and some of our friends came on video to kiss us. Basically, we did this. So it was a kiss every 10 seconds. And we had conversations about love and physical touch. And, you know, all this I did during the pandemic. So it was in honor of my friends and basically just the cultivation of love in my life. So in terms of my future direction, this is my grandma. I'm learning how to archive her right now because she's getting really old, and I'm spending a lot of time just sort of reflecting on that. So with my Buddhist background, I'm trying to reframe my focus of death into just sort of, you know, continuing this gratitude and just celebrating life and having that be my art, because, you know, the people in my life are art and they're to be cherished. So yeah, that's my work. You guys can talk to me. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Katie. Yeah, who has questions for Katie? You can type in the chat. Patty, come on up.
Hello.
Hi, nice to meet you.
The work's amazing. I love the Kiss Me Again piece. I have a question about the Confide series, especially the photographs in the bathroom. Have you ever had somebody talk to you about a misread on maybe human trafficking, even though that doesn't sound like your intention?
No, actually, no. I've never had anybody come up to me about that.
Okay. Because I was just thinking how the body is just packed into this tiny space. So anyway, I thought it might be interesting for you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Patty. Anyone else have questions for Katie? Yeah, Emily, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask.
First of all, Melanie, we can barely hear what's going on over there, but Katie had a question. I was so interested in like the invisible labor in your work, and even just like the sort of metaphor like birthing and like the labor to both birth and be birthed. And I'm just interested in how, well, one, if you're like interested in talking about that, or how you address it, and like either like how the work is shown, or like how you kind of contend with that, I guess.
In terms of rebirthing, I guess that's,
Or just like invisible labor in your work and how like in general. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I guess in terms of that, I like to my work is very much based on, I like non-physical things. Like I don't like having things take up space in the world. So it's a lot of experience that, you know, I guess it could be interpreted as invisible and stuff like that. But I guess what I value is sort of like the unseen, and just kind of presenting that and having presence be important. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. You can elaborate, but yeah.
No, that was great. Thanks. I just, yeah, like the photo is like the object taking up space. So the documentation of the invisible like process is. Anyway, yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Thank you, Emily. Any other questions for Katie before we move on? Okay, let's go ahead and move on to our, can you hear me?
I can,
Katie can. Okay.
but it's not like, it's not, it
What
maybe it's
about now? Is
better.
that okay?
That's a little bit better. Yeah, it
Oh,
was
good.
quiet
All right.
before.
Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to Patrick Stockmall. So go ahead, Patrick, you can share your screen and start whenever you're ready.
All right. Okay, so everybody can hear me and see the presentation? Yeah, okay. All right, so before I get started, I just want to thank everyone again, as well as Sculpture X, for letting me participate in this opportunity. All right, so hello, my name is Patrick Stockmall. I'm currently attending OCAD University, pursuing a BFA in Sculpture and Installation, as well as a minor in Integrated Media. The next slide that will come up is a little bit about my practice, just an artist statement taken from my website. I'm not going to read it because it's a little long, but I will summarize in saying that my practice is very much object-based and sculpturally grounded. And I'm interested in things like material agency and how materials can generate meaning. I'm also really invested in contemporary theory and philosophy, so that kind of grounds my work in many ways as well. And there's a lot of similar ideas being explored, so I hope it's not too repetitive in terms of like the conceptual content that I'm speaking to or speaking about. So this work is a performance called TLC, and it's documented through these two videos playing side by side simultaneously. And basically in the one on the left side, I am in a forest, I strip nude, I go inside of this grave that I dug into the forest floor, breathe deeply for a few minutes, come back out, abrasively clean myself, and then reclothe. And then the video next to that, the grave has become a basin and I wash a decomposing log with a variety of cleaning substances. So in this work, I was interested in exploring gestures, specifically acts of cleaning and maintenance of both self and other, and this kind of disparity between that gesture's intended mode of signification and how it seems to communicate care or appreciation or reverence through preservation, and how materially these actions kind of reveal other intermaterial bodily kind of things going on. And so I was interested in how cleaning became an act of violence and how it stripped the microbiome of the log and kind of inhibited it from engaging in certain processes. And so that kind of led me to think about cleaning through the lens of how it asserts boundaries and kind of delineates things, and how through a kind of proximal bodily engagement, those kind of definition of boundaries around things kind of structure what it means to be human, or the idea of the human as a kind of universal, I guess, biological being. And so I was basically really interested in like these conceptualized relational bodily contingencies that arise from the systems of order and separation that are generated through acts of cleaning and maintenance, as well as self-care. So this is a work called Permeable Infrastructure, and it's basically a giant pillow-shaped petri dish that's placed in a forest. And I was really interested in engaging in how agar materially embodied certain liminal and transgressive qualities in which boundaries become disillusioned through how it exists in context and contact with other things. So specifically with agar, this idea of like inside outside being blurred and like alive and decaying or dead as well, because the agar kind of like materially integrates that which is outside of it through contact into itself, and it becomes reconfigured through the form of bacteria. And so I was interested in how this points to kind of a material alterity of the world, or how the material configurations of matter do not exist confined to various epistemological structures, namely like binaries like inside, outside, biotic, abiotic, subject, object, et cetera, And I also wanted to use the form of the pillow and kind of imbue it with these qualities to kind of de-anthropocentrize the object, or propose the pillow as an infrastructure, not for the form of a human head, and sort of conforms to that form and is a tool, I guess, for human comfort, but to allow for the form of the pillow to become like a site that conforms to these sort of processes of the bacteria colonies that grow on it. And you can see it kind of deteriorating it here throughout the slides and shrinking and becoming like mummified pretty much. So this next artwork is called Monolith, and it's basically a 3-foot tall glycerin soap rectangular prism with all of these substances and objects embedded in it. And in this work, I wanted to examine the kind of interactions between all of these objects, as well as between objects generally and the human subject, to think through how the human subject is asserted as such through constructed bodily encounters vis-a-vis objects and their systems of representation. And so I wanted to try and subvert how these objects, both kind of intimately entangled with the human and also not, how they mean, and to propose new contingencies and connections between them, and to allude to a kind of material decentralization of the human. And so basically these substances commingle and materially affect each other. This material assemblage is presented within a column of soap, a pristine material of preservation, of maintaining boundaries. But what occurs in the soap is not necessarily a preservation of these materials or an assertion of their individuated autonomy, but an entanglement of all the matter within the soap. And ironically, the soap actually perpetuates the decay of the organic material and foods contained in it. And this results in this constantly processual becoming through contamination, in which things become forever and increasingly materially entangled through the kind of rot and spread of all of this organic matter. And so the last artwork I will talk about kind of marks an endeavor into electronics and physical computing, as opposed to a purely sculptural or object-based practice. And so what happens in this work is an ultrasonic sensor detects the proximity of someone, and when one is within a certain range, it sends a signal via Arduino to an air blower that is connected to tubing, that is connected to an air mattress that is underground. And this creates that illusion of the ground breathing. And so when conceiving of this project, I was really interested in how passive human engagement kind of triggers the landscape to behave in this anthropomorphic way, and how this signifies a form of hyper aliveness, or like a very evident performativity. And so also the air mattress as a signifier of nomadic comfortability, how it isolates the body from contact with the dirty ground, and how it's tied to like recreationalizing the landscape in the context of camping was also interesting to me, as it points to like how the landscape can perform like for us through our hand in a way. I don't know if that makes sense, hopefully it does, but this performative element is central to the piece, in that the landscape kind of performs for the human in a human way in the presence of a human. So it's very like human, human, human. And what I'm trying to do here is kind of basically point to this kind of proposed neutral stance that we take when we look at material reality, I guess, and show how anthropocentrism is basically ingrained in that, and that view of material reality is not in fact neutral. And so I was also thinking about subverting the function of the air mattress and the kind of thinking that that represents in terms of spatial orientation, above versus below, and how a hierarchy of objects or beings can be predicated on that. And in this case, like the human can be seen as exceptional from the landscape through orientation and the function of the air mattress, and how it reduces contact with the earth or ground's dirtiness. And I was interested in sort of, just ingraining the mattress into the actual earth, and kind of critiquing its function too, and the ideology that is laden within it through this hyper performativity of the landscape. Hopefully that made sense. So yeah, this is just some video documentation of that piece. And this is my contact information if anybody wants to speak to me or has questions about my work or anything. My Instagram and website are also up there. So yeah, feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Patrick, for your presentation. Does anyone have questions for Patrick? Either on Zoom, you can type it or unmute yourself, or come on.
Hey,
Hello.
thank you for your presentation. I wanted to ask, your artist statement, mm, what I was able to read while it was up on the screen, it talked about agency, questioning the agency of the human. And I noticed you addressed a lot of plants and bacteria. I was wondering, are you planning to continue, are you mainly focused on plants and bacteria, or are you looking at other forms of life, like animals or fungi or various other organisms like those?
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in that. I engaged with those particularly. I'm not so sure why, probably because it was most accessible to me at the time or whatever came to mind first. But yeah, I'm definitely, in speaking about agency, I'm not necessarily trying to like negate or take away a kind of human agency. I'm just trying to question what that specific kind of agency that we think of as humans are imbued with, what kind of like systems or structures that's predicated on, and to be more inclusive in granting everything agency, like matter itself pretty much in a way, which falls in alignment with a lot of like post-humanist thinking and like new materialisms and stuff like that, which I'm really interested in currently. And so I am definitely looking to broaden the kind of material that I use in my work, and to keep exploring these ideas of how we can grant things agency and how things are kind of intertangled within each other. So yeah, definitely. I have thought about fungi before and other forms of life. It's just a matter of actually getting it and figuring out what to do with it and the accessibility of that. So yeah. Hopefully that answered your questions.
Yes. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for your question. Anyone else have a question for Patrick? Guys, come on up. Another person working with microbes. Woo.
Hey, Patrick, great presentation. I was just curious, do you view your materials as collaborators?
Definitely. Yeah. I think, yeah, I'm very like materially oriented in my practice. So it's difficult too, because sometimes you have to like negotiate with the materials because they do their own things. And so in my practice, I guess what I've come to learn and what I try to do now is to kind of not set out for a fixed trajectory, but to allow that agency of the material to take place and then respond to that in like an organic way. So yeah, I definitely see materials as collaborators, and it's a kind of dialogue between myself and what I'm trying to do in my intention and the material and its own, I guess you could call, intention.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Awesome. Thank you, Dennis, for your question. Great. Thank you, Patrick, very much. We're going to move on to Bradley Wyand, who is our last presenter. So go ahead, Bradley, whenever you're ready. You can share your screen and start presenting.
Hey there. I just want to give a quick thank to Melanie and Riley for organizing this talk, and the people at Sculpture X for being so accommodating and letting us zoom in. I wish I could have made it, being from Greensburg, Pennsylvania, but things happen. Anyways, I'm currently in my thesis year at Ohio State University. This is a recent install. I'm primarily an object base. I have an object-based practice. where I also dabble with performance. So there was a ladder, a sword, and a textile piece. The sword was a wooden sword that I picked up at a thrift shop and then proceeded to excessively flock it. I really wanted to take this aggressive object, even though it was wooden. I think if it was metal, I wouldn't have picked it up, but and sort of soften it and decorate it. And I'm curious about decoration as a way to make things soft. During the pandemic, I also learned how to machine knit, and I created that textile piece in the back. And I also learned how to hack the knitting machine so I can put any sort of text or image. So it says soft green sculpture, and it's sort of in dialogue with that sword as a declaration. It's also made out of a black metal font, and often they pull from medieval imagery. So that's where the sword comes in. Also in this room is, it doesn't convey well in photos, but it's a really shiny ladder that's also green and found, but I bedazzled it with fashion spikes that you would find on, say, like a punk's leather or pleather jacket. And I'm interested in like utility of objects where like I've tried climbing this barefoot and it's terribly painful. So this sort of strange object. With the machine knitting, I also made this concrete bag out of fishing line and tinsel to try and think of unconventional materials to use. I also create these objects and often feel like they need some sort of performative action. So the following slide is me pouring an actual bag of cement into the it's really shiny, knitted bag. And just that simple gesture is enough for me sometimes. In an extended video, I zhuzh it up a little bit, but I also use concrete and cement more conventionally. I cast a toolbox and wrapped it in a sexy like wrestling leotard, and then buffed it with men's deodorant and put it on this plywood pedestal. Over the summer, I was meditating on things in my studio. I have this garland of garlic that was used in a performance hanging on my door to my studio to sort of ward off vampires or bad spirits. So I decided to put it in a space with a few other found objects that have been hanging around my studio. I'm a big Bob Gober fan, so this is my sort of nod to him and his sinks. It's a stainless steel sink that I just found and placed it in this room. Thinking of the vampires as sort of evil, I'm thinking of the sink as sort of a way to achieve cleanliness. And I'm also thinking about coupling. There's two bowls in the sink side by side, which sort of speaks to the next slide that is two SawStop blades. And SawStop is a brand of a table saw that has a safety mechanism in it that if you run your finger or some sort of bad wood or whatever conducts electricity through the blade, it'll activate and drop the SawStop blade, and this little break here will catch it so you don't injure yourself. So during my time at OSU, I've activated it twice, and I've installed it as a sort of nod to Felix Gonzalez Torres' Untitled Perfect Lovers. But rather than being perfect lovers, I think of it more as imperfect or maybe even failure on my part for activating it. And failure feeds into my performative things. Following slide is me jumping rope. And the clip I provided, I'm doing it fairly well, but there was a lot of tripping up. You can see the garlic bouncing on my neck. I just was curious about how long I can endure and do this performance. This is an earlier piece where I found a punching bag and decided to turn it into a pommel horse, sort of within the gymnastics arena. But recently I've been curious or interested in thinking, like, I don't want to carry all of these big objects with me outside of grad school. So I decided to upcycle, if you will, and turn the shorts, or turn the punching bag into a pair of shorts. Again, Everlast feeding into that endurance idea. And this final slide is my contact info, but also during peak pandemic when I had no studio, we were locked out, I just went out into a field and balanced a broom on my finger. Again, failing at the activity. Thank you.
Thank you, Bradley. I actually have a question for you. I am so curious about, so it seems like there is a big theme of like performative athleticism in your work. And I just wonder about, where does that come from, or how does that inform your work? Like, yeah, where does that come from in your kind of, because it seems like a very interesting through line.
It's curious to me as well, because as a child I wasn't very athletic, but there's this maybe like this quarter life crisis sort of made me desire to like really think about my body and endurance, and that's awful to think about. I'm so young. Anyways, I was also sort of on like a Matthew Barney kick for a while, which may have fed into that. But yeah, that's great that you noticed that. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, I was just very curious about that. Anyone else have questions for Bradley? Anyone on Zoom or in person? Okay. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Bradley, for your presentation. Thank you, everyone, for your presentations. This is amazing. So nice to hear about everyone's work. I'm so grateful for all of you that are here today. Lisa, I don't know if you want to come up and maybe just say a few words about the rest of the afternoon. Delaney. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so we are back to Chatham University and lunch is waiting. Head to the Chatham Library and Murray Hill Avenue is your free parking spot for those heading over there. And Carrie Furnace is 4 to 8. But there's lunch and a panel and a reception for the 12 by 12 small sculpture exhibition at Chatham first. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks for being here.
I actually do have one more thing I'd like to say. Just a really quick, I really wanted to thank all of our jurors who helped select these wonderful individuals that spoke today. That would be Dennis Doyle, who is here, who has asked questions. He's a wonderful human. Simon Tatum, Noelle Choi, who is in the show that is at Seton Hill at the Harlan Gallery. And Violet Mainborough, and the facilitators were Riley Brown and myself, who Riley Brown is here. So I just want to thank you guys as well for helping put all this together. Yeah, that's all. Thanks to all the artists. All right, thank you guys. That's all. See you soon. Bye. Yeah, have a great afternoon.